So, what if I told you that an entire empire of religious belief, a whole system built around the idea of a supernatural miracle working prophet, could be completely dismantled by just two tiny words in the Quran? Yeah, I know, it sounds like a massive claim. But today, we're going to follow the evidence and see just how deep this rabbit hole really goes. It seems almost impossible, right? But the argument we're diving into today proposes that the key to a completely different reading of Scripture has been hiding in plain sight this whole time, tucked away in one of the most common little pronouns you can find. And that's really the big question we have to ask ourselves. We're about to go on a bit of an investigative journey here to see if one tiny little piece of grammar can actually hold the weight of such a world-changing claim. All right, so our investigation kicks off with what's been called a quiet key. It's a pronoun that's all over the text, but once we figure out exactly what it's pointing to, well, that might just change everything. Okay, so the pronoun is vihi, and it's pretty simple. It just means with it, by it, or through it. Now, that seems straightforward enough, right? But the entire puzzle, the whole thing, hinges on one simple question. What is the it? And this right here, this is the unbreakable rule that the entire argument is built on. According to a strict Quran-only analysis, a really clear pattern emerges. The pronoun bihi always points back to the message, the revelation, the guidance. And just as important, it never points to the physical person, the man delivering the message. This one distinction is the bedrock for everything we're about to uncover. Let's see it in action. Take verse 4:105. The nabi, the prophet, is told to judge between people. Okay, but how? On whose authority? The verse is crystal clear. He is to judge by it, by what Allah has shown him. The authority isn't in him personally, it is entirely in the message. And this isn't a one-off thing. We see it again in verse 2:13. People get into arguments, right? So how are they resolved? The verse says they're guided through it, through the truth of the book that they were differing about. Again and again, the solution, the authority, comes from the message, not the man. So, if we accept this rule, that all authority and action is bihi, by the message, well, that's when the first really big domino starts to wobble. And that first domino is the entire traditional definition of what a prophet even is. And this just lays out the difference so clearly. The traditional sectarian model gives us this idea of a nabi as a special, almost magical person with his own authority. But the Quran-only model says, nope, a nabi isn't a type of person, it's a function, a role. Think of it like a human channel whose only authority comes from the message they're carrying. So it all boils down to this really simple but powerful formula. No bihi, no message, means there's no nabi, no function. The role literally cannot exist without a message to deliver. The man is just a man. The message is what creates the job title. And once you redefine the nabi, things start to get really interesting. It's not just that one idea that changes. It kicks off a massive chain reaction, causing a total cascade failure of all these other religious doctrines that were built on that old idea of the prophet. Okay, let's just walk through this domino effect. It starts with number 1. All authority is in the message, bihi. Got it? That means number 2, the messenger's only job is delivery, so he can't be making up his own laws, which then leads to 3. The text itself, the saying, is the real messenger, and that completely reframes number 4. Obey the messenger now has to mean obey the message. And then comes a knockout blow, number 5. The prophet himself has to obey the message, which proves he's not the source of it, he's its very first subject. All right, so if the bihi principle was the key that got us through the front door, then verse 650 is the master key. This one verse seems to systematically unlock and dismantle every last claim of a supernatural prophet. Just take a second to really let this verse sink in. This isn't subtle. It's a series of incredibly powerful direct denials. The messenger is literally commanded to state point blank what he is not and what he does not have. Let's pull this apart. But first, we have to get a key term right. Al-Ghaib. It's usually translated as the unseen, which makes you think of some mystical, invisible world. But in the Quran, it's always contrasted with al-Shahada, which means the witnessed. So ghaib isn't what's permanently unseeable. It's what just hasn't been witnessed yet. Think of your own death. It's ghaib to you now, but one day it will become a witnessed reality. So with that in mind, let's look at the 4 denials again. I don't have God's treasuries. That's a flat denial of controlling nature, no miracles. I don't know the ghaib. That's a denial of knowing what hasn't happened yet. No fortune-telling, no heavenly journeys. I am not an angel. That's pretty straightforward, right? It's a denial of being perfect or infallible. And then the final lock. I only follow what is conveyed. This confirms that his one and only guide is the message. That's our bihi again, not some mystical hotline to God. So when you put those four statements together, wow, they just pull the rug out from under the entire traditional model. They systematically eliminate the foundation for pretty much all of the invented metaphysics built around the prophet's personality. And this table just drives the point home so perfectly. You believe in miracles like splitting the sea? Well, the verse says, I don't possess God's treasuries. What about heavenly ascensions or seeing angels? The verse says, I do not know the ghaib. The idea that the prophet was infallible, he's commanded to say, I am not an angel. It's like a checklist, and every major metaphysical belief just gets crossed right off. It's a systematic deconstruction. So, if you take away that whole personality-centered supernatural model, what are you even left with? Well, the argument is that what remains is actually a far more coherent and powerful system, one that is centered entirely on the book. And what's so fascinating is that the Quran doesn't just drop this bombshell in 650 and move on. The verses that come right after it actually double down on this logic. They start building out the principles of this new book-centered paradigm. Let's see what that looks like. So, in this system, any warning comes by the book. There's no human standing in between. The community isn't built around a charismatic leader. It's built around people united by the message itself. And a person's worth has nothing to do with their social status or how close they are to a prophet, but everything to do with how they personally respond to the truth. And so we land here with this really stark contrast. On one side, a personality-centered religion where authority is the man, guidance is imitation, and there's a hierarchy based on who you know. And, on the other, a book-centered system where the authority is the text, guidance comes from reason, and everyone is on a level playing field, judged only by how they engage with the message. And it all comes back to that question in verse 650. Are the blind and the seeing equal? In this interpretation, the blindness is looking at the man, the physical form. The sight is looking past that, to the content, to the illumination of the message itself. It all ends not with a call to follow, but with a call to think. And that leaves us with one last massive provocative question. Because if the message is the ultimate authority, if guidance comes from engaging with that text, then the responsibility shifts, doesn't it? It's no longer about following a person. It's about understanding a message. So what then is our role in that process?